When we imagine ancient Romans, the picture is usually very clear. We see marble statues with sharp profiles, men wrapped in white togas, and powerful faces stamped onto silver coins. In popular imagination, the Romans appear almost like a single people, the Latins, who founded the city of Rome and eventually built one of the most powerful empires in history. For a long time, this seemed like a simple story. Rome began as a small Latin city in central Italy and gradually expanded across the Mediterranean. The people behind that expansion were assumed to be the descendants of the same early Roman population. But in the last decade, a new scientific tool has started to challenge that idea. That tool is ancient DNA. Archaeologists have excavated graves in and around Rome for centuries. These burials contain human remains dating back thousands of years. Until recently, they could tell us about diet, disease, or burial customs. Today, scientists can also extract DNA from those bones and study where these people came from. In 2019, an international team of researchers analyzed the DNA of dozens of individuals buried around Rome across thousands of years of history. Their goal was simple: to understand how the population of the region changed over time. The results revealed something surprising. Even during the Iron Age, around the time Rome was founded in the 8th century BCE, the population of central Italy was already genetically mixed. The people living there carried ancestry from two major groups. One came from early European farmers who had migrated into Europe from the Near East thousands of years earlier. The other came from steppe populations who had spread across large parts of Europe during the Bronze Age. In other words, even the earliest Romans were not an isolated or pure population. They were already the result of multiple waves of migration that had shaped Europe long before the city of Rome appeared. The DNA evidence also helped clarify the origins of another famous civilization of ancient Italy, the Etruscans. For centuries, historians debated where the Etruscans came from. Some ancient writers believed they had migrated from Anatolia, in modern-day Turkey. But genetic research tells a different story. The DNA of Etruscan individuals shows that they were very similar to other populations already living in central Italy. In other words, they were most likely local people who developed their own unique culture rather than migrants from distant lands. These discoveries reveal something important about the origins of Rome. The city did not emerge from a single isolated tribe. From the very beginning, it existed in a region shaped by different peoples, migrations, and cultures. And this early mixture was only the beginning. As Rome grew from a small Italian city into the center of a vast empire, the genetic story of its population would become far more complex. As Rome expanded from a regional power into a vast empire, something remarkable happened to the population of the city itself. Rome did not just grow politically and militarily. It also became one of the most diverse cities in the ancient world. Genetic evidence shows that during the height of the Roman Empire, the population of Rome changed dramatically. DNA from individuals buried in the city during the imperial period reveals strong ancestry from the Eastern Mediterranean, including regions such as Greece, Anatolia, Syria, and the Levant. In other words, by the time Rome ruled the Mediterranean, many of the people living in the capital were not originally from Italy. There were several reasons for this transformation. First, Rome was the center of a massive trading network that connected Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Merchants, sailors, craftsmen, and administrators constantly moved between provinces, and many eventually settled in the capital. Second, the Roman economy relied heavily on slavery. Wars across the empire brought large numbers of enslaved people to Italy. Many of them later gained freedom and became part of Roman society, contributing to the city's growing diversity. And third, the Roman Empire allowed for a surprising level of mobility. Soldiers, officials, and workers often moved across enormous distances within the empire, bringing their families and cultures with them. By the 2nd century CE, Rome had become something very different from the small Latin settlement it once was. It was now a massive cosmopolitan city where people from across the Mediterranean world lived side by side. This diversity was visible even at the very top of Roman power. Several Roman emperors themselves came from outside Italy. Trajan was born in the Roman province of Hispania, in modern Spain. Hadrian, one of Rome's most famous rulers, also came from the same region. Septimius Severus was born in North Africa, in the city of Leptis Magna. Philip the Arab came from the Roman province of Syria. These examples show something important about the Roman world. Being Roman was not primarily about ethnicity. It was about citizenship, culture, and participation in the political system of the empire. By the height of its power, Rome had become far more than an Italian city. It had turned into a global hub of the ancient world, a place where people, languages, and cultures from across the Mediterranean came together in a single city. For centuries, Rome stood at the center of one of the largest empires in human history. But by the 5th century CE, that empire began to collapse. Political instability, economic pressure, and repeated invasions slowly weakened Roman control over Western Europe. In 476 CE, the last Western Roman emperor was deposed, marking the traditional end of the Western Roman Empire. But the fall of the empire did not simply end Roman history. It also triggered another major transformation in the population of Italy. During the early Middle Ages, several new groups moved into the region. Among the most influential were the Germanic tribes, who had already been migrating across Europe for generations. The Goths established kingdoms in parts of the former Roman territories, while the Lombards eventually conquered large areas of Italy in the 6th century. These migrations brought new cultures, languages, and genetic lineages into the Italian peninsula. Genetic studies of early medieval burials show clear evidence of this change. Individuals from Lombard cemeteries, for example, often carried ancestry connected to Northern and Central Europe. This suggests that at least some of these groups arrived as migrating communities rather than simply as small ruling elites. Over time, these newcomers mixed with the local populations that had already been shaped by centuries of Roman imperial migration. The result was a new genetic landscape. Modern Italians are not simply the direct descendants of the people who lived in Rome during the height of the empire. Instead, their ancestry reflects several different historical layers. One layer comes from the ancient peoples of Italy, who lived there long before Rome became powerful. Another layer comes from the enormous population movements during the Roman Empire, when people from across the Mediterranean settled in the region. And a third layer comes from the migrations of early medieval Europe. This complex mixture helps explain why Italy today shows significant genetic diversity from north to south. In many ways, the DNA of modern Italy mirrors the long and complicated history of the peninsula itself. And it also reinforces a larger conclusion about the Roman world. Rome was never defined by a single people or a single origin. From its earliest beginnings to its imperial peak and beyond, it was shaped by constant movement, migration, and cultural exchange. The DNA evidence does not reveal the bloodline of a legendary founder like Romulus. Instead, it reveals something far more interesting: the genetic history of a city and a civilization built from many different peoples.